Hello, I'd like to welcome you to the first episode of RotoWire Fantasy Football Live. Now, during the preseason, I'll be on every day except Thursdays and Fridays. Got to take a day off here and there, right? Once we get to the regular season, I will let you know the 5 days this RotoWire show will take place. We'll still have the start sit show on Sundays, the gambling show on Saturdays, but we'll definitely set you up for success. Now, fantasy football draft season. The show is going to have three main components. First, I'll break down training camp news and notes, and I'll give you actionable advice every time. Then I'll do a deep dive on a few players to get us ready for those drafts. And then I'll finish by bringing in an industry guest to break down a few more players, or like today, talk about betting. Now, if you like this show, which you just started, but if you know me, hopefully I can give you a great opportunity to have some fun. Please consider hitting the like and subscribe button on RotoWire YouTube if that's where you're watching. It'll help us let them know it'll help us let them know if the show is something you value. And please, if you can, please follow me on socials at Jim Coventry and NFL. I'll be putting out threads on Twitter. I'll start that today through the entire season, 5 days a week. All right, before we get into those training camp news and notes, if you want to see my weekly fantasy football strategy articles, I can hook you up with a free trial at RotoWire. Just go to rotowire.com/Jim. Not even a credit card's needed, just an email address. And if you look to subscribe for the season of RotoWire, we have a sale. We rarely have those. 20% off. rotowire.com/sale. And then finally, stay tuned. End of the show, John Ryan of the Predictive Playbook and RotoWire is going to talk NFL betting futures. All right, we had some news and notes over the weekend that have potential fantasy football impact. Let's start out with Las Vegas Raiders news. So no surprise to anybody, but Josh Jacobs will not report the training camp, and he was spotted taking a plane on his way out of Vegas, and that was reported by Tom Pelissero, and that was actually Monday morning he was flying out. So look, here's how I look at it for Josh Jacobs, and if you're in fantasy, this is dangerous. We know he had a phenomenal season last year, and I wondered going into the year, and I didn't bet heavily on him, but a player going into a last year of a contract, remember, the Raiders did not add his fifth-year option, so he was playing for free agency, and he went from like 3.95 yards per carry in the prior 2 seasons, almost up a full yard last year, and you know it, he was over 2,000 scrimmage yards. Here's the thing, he hasn't signed the franchise tag, he won't report. Here's the business decision, right? The franchise tag for running backs, it's just $10 million. Now, aside from tight ends, the lowest tag, $18 million. So it's really not much money in the scheme of things. He's 25, right? And so Jacobs, with that 2,000 yard scrimmage yard season on his resume, he can get a long-term contract. He's 25. He can get it next year. If he sits out, and I know running backs don't make a lot of money, but he's proven himself, and it may be his best business decision to stay off the field. If he gets injured, suffers a knee injury, something really devastating, that money's not showing up. It's a $10 million and he is done. He's going to want financial security. Now, we don't know how this will shake out because maybe the $10 million is important to him, but maybe, and I talk about Saquon Barkley in the same breath, what if he has the minor injury? I joke and say a hangnail, but I'm not playing. And it could be that simple. Business decision, anything that makes me look less than my best, I'm not on the field. And if you're in fantasy, what if that happens during the fantasy playoffs and he kind of mails it in? So be careful when you're drafting Josh Jacobs. We don't know, but I want you to understand from a business standpoint, he has plenty of motivation to not be on the field. All right, Jimmy Garoppolo, we're going to stick with Las Vegas Raiders news here. He passed the physical. He had that foot surgery earlier in the offseason, so he's ready for training camp. And that was a big talking point. So with Jimmy Garoppolo, it was like, well, they could let him go with no cap hit at all. And so we started having free fall ideas about the Las Vegas offense. Now, here's the biggest problem. Last year, Derek Carr, for most of the season, was their quarterback until they parted ways with him. Josh McDaniels was running a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. We call that 11 personnel. And Derek Carr was horrible against defenses defending 11 personnel. Now, Derek Carr was better when they put 2 tight ends on the field, give him extra blocking. Defenses usually got to commit an extra body to the box, meaning 1 fewer secondary player to throw against. Derek Carr is much better against 12. Well, Jimmy Garoppolo, when he was good with the 49ers, remember, it was all heavy personnel and the scheme of Shanahan getting the ball quickly into receivers' hands. This could be a very problematic system fit for Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, in terms of Davante Adams, look, if Adams is getting the ball, he's getting the ball. Adams is Superman, right? So I don't really worry a lot about Adams. He had 180 targets last year, and I know he only caught 100 of them. So I think that Davante Adams is fine. But I am really worried about Garoppolo's protection. And I know the tackles for the Raiders, especially Colton Miller, they do hold up well. The interior line is a bit of an issue. Even though Garoppolo was playing well with the 49ers, just remember this. He only had 1.43 touchdowns per game in that 49er system. And we know the injury history. He missed 18 of 50 games in 3 years. So Jimmy Garoppolo, look, I don't think anybody's saying he's the answer in fantasy football, but I think when you're in these super flex or 2 quarterback leagues, he's a quarterback 3, I think. I think you don't put him in that top 24 bucket. Davante could still get his, and Garoppolo may not have a great season. But again, with the 11 personnel they stubbornly ran last year under Josh McDaniels, I do think it's a very rough fit for Jimmy G. And anyway, I have no shares of him. But again, if you need him as a quarterback 3, you definitely can sign off as that, because once the top 24 are off the board, it really is just kind of a crapshoot at that point. All right, Denver Broncos news is next. Javonte Williams, he will not be placed on that active PUP list to start training camp. That's James Palmer of the NFL Network reported that. So look, we are not sure. We know he's active and he can be to practice. We don't know what his full participation will be, and it's yet to see, and we'll keep our eye on that. We don't know if it's full practices. We don't know if it's just, off to the side working. And his injury was week 4 last year, but he not just had an ACL, he had an LCL knee injury on the same occasion. So it was a little more complicated. And we do know that he's supposed to continue to wear a brace on the knee. That may not be a big deal, just to be aware of that. But right now, based on today's news that he is on the active list, we have to think he will be ready for week 1. And the thing is, he's a dynamic football player, right? But they bring in Samaje Perine. And even when Williams was back healthy, he was splitting the workload. So I don't know that there's any scenario where he is just the guy. I think organizationally, and I know Sean Payton is there now, but I do think this is going to be more of a split backfield. Now, think about this, though. We go in with Sean Payton. Javonte Williams is an excellent receiver. So, and roles, whatever, but I'm not saying he's Alvin Kamara. Please understand that he's not Alvin Kamara back in the day. But will Sean Payton try to deploy a robust screen game? But here's the thing. We can't make the lazy analysis and say, okay, screen game, Javonte Williams, Alvin Kamara, 81 catches a year, rock and roll, let's go. Here's the thing. Don't forget, Drew Brees was one of the best screen game quarterbacks we'll ever see. And what I mean by that is this. When Brees would set up a screen, first of all, he knew how to look off the short area defenders to give his receiver out of the backfield space. And then the ball was almost always thrown perfectly to lead that running back like Kamara into space, immediately getting the top speed. Russell Wilson, sure, he could dump the ball off. He could just do swing pass. He could do that. But the screen game has never been a strength of Russell Wilson. Like I said, anybody could dump the ball, but the precision of running a robust screen game, I don't know that that's in his repertoire. Russell Wilson wants to chuck the ball downfield. We know that, and he'll be coached down a bit on that. But that said, I don't know that we will get the best of Javonte Williams as a receiver because of the quarterback play. And I imagine Sean Payton will realize the limitations of his quarterback. So again, as of right now, we understand with Javonte Williams that he has been dropped significantly. Pick 81 he's going in average drafts. I get that from fantasymojo.com. They're my go-to. But I do think he's going to be in a split backfield. We don't know what level of percent he's going to be healthy coming back from the knee injury. But I still think if you're getting him around 24th running backs off the board, a little more than that, I think at that point he's worth a reasonable shot, unless you feel he's not going to be healthy. If you have injury concerns, fade him. But if you have injury optimism on him, then go right ahead. All right, Baltimore Ravens news. So the Ravens activated Rashod Bateman with that foot deal. He's reported. So they activated him, so he's good to go for camp. Here's the thing. We were worried because Friday he wasn't in practice, but he had that foot injury last year. Missed from week 6 on. Week 6 he got the injury, and then he had that cortisone shot in June, and that was scary because his ADP dropped. And I'm fairly bullish on Rashod Bateman. Last year he didn't get many targets. He only played 6 games after 12 as a rookie, right? But what happened was his efficiency was through the charts. Now it's small sample size, but he was a first-round pick. So this is a player that we were expecting a whole lot from, and he was delivering. I mean, he had 15 catches for 285 yards on 28 targets in 6 games. So the catch rate wasn't great, but his yards per target was up 2.5 yards from rookie year. He had a couple big catches that may have slanted his yards per reception, but it was still 19. So I am very optimistic that if we get Rashod Bateman healthy, he could be that alpha receiver on what may be a very good offense this year. Talk about that in a second. But right now, before him reporting and being active, I should say, he was going as wide receiver 48, pick 103. And that is a great value if you're betting on his foot being okay. As long as he gets some practice in, we're looking good there. But I do think he's what we call that X receiver, right? He could line up on the line of scrimmage, take on the press man. Zay Flowers on the other side was more of a classic Z. He'll be off the line a little bit, give him a little bit of a free release. Odell Beckham will be involved. We don't know to what degree. Remember, he's 30. He's coming back from missing a full season with ACL. And I imagine Odell and Zay Flowers may be splitting reps in 2 receiver sets. If Bateman's healthy, I have to think Bateman's the guy from what he showed in limited action. And then, of course, Mark Andrews is there. So Todd Monken is now the offensive coordinator in Baltimore. And so when we look at this now, remember, the Ravens, other than the year they lost all 3, Dobbins, Edwards, Justice Hill, to preseason knee injuries, other than that season, they're like the top in the league in rushing attempts. Now, last year, the Falcons took that over, but they're a heavy, heavy run team, right? Up to 55% in some years, which that's astronomical, right? But now, I think with Todd Monken in there, they're going to throw a little more on early downs when the defense is looking run. They're definitely going to take more downfield shots because Greg Roman definitely didn't utilize Lamar Jackson's arm. And so this offense, I don't think this is going to be a pass-heavy offense. We're not talking Chiefs. We're not talking Bengals. But I think if we just take that 54 or so % run rate and it goes down to 50, 49, I think that is going to raise the whole roof of that offense. They, again, not going to be crazy pass-heavy, but they're going to be more pass-favorable. And Lamar Jackson, the only worry, and I moved him Lamar Jackson, is just the concern that he's missed 5 games 2 years in a row, mobile quarterback, and there's issues there. And we don't know what we have with the receivers. Back to Bateman. We don't know if that foot's going to have a setback. We don't know if Odell Beckham is going to look great at age 30 coming off that injury. We're not sure how Zay Flowers is going to acclimate in his new digs. Remember, he did not test well at the combine. So interesting moves there. But otherwise, I still am bullish on the Ravens offense, but I think it'll be more balanced than a lot of the media is pushing right now. I think the media is thinking this is going to be a pass dominant team. I think it's more balanced, but that's better for them. That defense is going to be good. All right, Kansas City Chief news. Oh, surprise, surprise. Kadarius Toney tweaked his knee, and he was like returning punts and practiced on Sunday, and that was reported by arrowheadpride.com. Anyway, he missed Monday's practice. He was off to the side or missed, so he wasn't involved there. So anyway, Tony's interesting. We know that. When he on the field, we know that he's capable of great things. Andy Reid used him very strategically when he was available last year, and it was clear Toney could handle what was given him. But the whole point is, we know the durability questions, and we're already seeing them. His ADP has gotten very aggressive. Again, fantasymojo.com, they're my go-to. They'll give you the last 3 days ADP. Now, I know it often doesn't move, but sometimes those micro moves make sense. But Toney is going as in average drafts, wide receiver 31, pick 68. So he's like in the solid wide receiver 3 and 12-team league range. And understand the upside is through the roof. He was 94th percentile after the catch. He could run out of, toss sweeps, things like that. He'll be a dynamic player when they utilize him. But just understand the missed time and this injury reminds you he's a very risky pick. I would feel a lot more comfortable instead of pick 68 if he was going around pick 80. There's a drop off in players once we get to that point. I still think when we're in the 60s and 70s, there's so many good players on the board that have safer floors. And I know we want to swing for the fence sometimes, but I think sometimes we take too big of a risk too early. So I'm advocating, if it's me, if he falls to 80 or so, yes, I'm in. But in the 60s, early 70s, yeah, there are other players I definitely want to target before Toney. I understand if he's healthy, he can be a league winner. So if you're in a large field tournament, that may be the way to go. Hey, if you're enjoying this content, please consider hitting that like and subscribe buttons if you're watching on YouTube. And please follow me on socials at Jim Coventry NFL. So that does it for the news and notes part. But I want to tell you this too. I'm a commissioner of a 12-team league. Well, more than one, right? But the participants in that one specific league, they are spread over 4 time zones. And then most of them, spouses, kids. And we struggle finding a date that works for everybody in the league. But this year, I got hip to this new tool at RotoWire, and you can use the scheduler, which is going to get your league put together to get a good date for you. Go to rotowire.com/scheduler and check that out. Now I'm going to talk about the 3 quarterbacks that you need to draft in 2023. Of course, if you're playing in Superflex or 2 quarterbacks leagues, you only need 1 quarterback, but I'm going to give you 3 really good options that I'm very interested in, especially at their draft cost this year. The first one, and he's really starting to pick up steam by some, but other people are completely fading him. I'd like to call him number 4 on the Cleveland Browns because of the garbage that he pulled a couple of years ago, but I'll say his name anyway, Deshaun Watson. He's going to be 28 this year, so he is by no means old. He has a lot of football ahead of him, right? And the last time we saw him play in a full season, he, on a points per game basis, was the QB6 in Houston. Now, right now in fantasy drafts, he's going as the QB9, pick 88. And again, that's per fantasymojo.com, my go-to for ADP. So here's what I thought. Last year, obviously, I watch every snap of every game. And what I saw with Watson was he was a player that was struggling to acclimate back to the speed of the game after missing almost 2 years. And that is a real thing. The longer the injury time, the more removed you are from that speed. And just processing completely changes. Look, another offseason, he had a good chunk of time on the field last year. I don't see a world where that speed of the game does not come back to him. So I think that people are rightfully factoring in last year's numbers. But I think it almost has to be completely thrown out the window. That's my opinion. And I am going to bet on him that he goes back to being that guy he was in Houston. I mean, there were little factors that, again, he wasn't good last year. But in the first 4 games, 2 touchdowns, 3 picks. And then in the last 2 games, it was 5-2. So, at least that flip, his completion percentage, awful, like 58%. That was like 10% below his baseline for his career. Overall, here's my expectation. Look, Cleveland, like every other team, they are gunning to try to win a Super Bowl. Well, they paid massive money to Watson. It was like $250 guaranteed million over his 5-year life of his contract. And they know to compete with the big boys in the AFC. You've got to be able to pass the football. And I think they're going to make this a pass-heavy offense. They're going to run this offense through Deshaun Watson. Nick Chubb's going to be a massive factor. I'll explain how this all works together in a minute. But the whole point with Watson is that He's going to have a top 6 offensive line. They're not like that number 1 line they were a couple of years ago, but they're still very, very good. And Amari Cooper, we saw last year, just playing at a very high level. Elijah Moore, to me, was a very big addition. He has that 4.35 speed, just incredible. And I think that when we have Elijah Moore in the slot often, he also can play outside in 2 receiver sets, but they're going to weaponize him. Remember, those last 5 games he played in 2021 before getting injured, he was averaging something like 5 catches, 76 yards, and he scored 5 touchdowns in his last 6 games. So he was playing at a very high level with bad quarterback play, and he's going to be the number 2 behind Cooper. I have to think this works out really well. Donovan Peoples-Jones, he was enjoying a breakout season last year, and in 3 receiver sets, we're going to see a lot of him. David Njoku had some injuries last year, but he really had a breakthrough season. This offense looks ready to pop. And I fully expect Deshaun Watson to finish as a top 5 quarterback this year because they are going to be very, very explosive on offense. Now, how does this help Nick Chubb? The difference is last year, Nick Chubb actually surprisingly struggled when there were 3 receiver sets. Normally, that's easier for running backs. But here's my point. Defenses were not worried about Jacoby Brissett, and they certainly weren't worried about the version of Watson that was out there. And so Chubb was still facing defenses gearing up to stop him. The minute Watson shows he's back and they're playing 3 receiver sets with that offensive line, Nick Chubb, for the first time in his career, is going to see space to run. And in my opinion, he is the best pure runner in the NFL. And to me, it's not even, there'll be a close second. And Nick Chubb is still young enough. This offense has everything they need to be unstoppable. I do predict, again, as I said, they're going to go pass first and run off of that, which will make them way more dangerous. They'll be fine if they're facing, because if they keep seeing, if defenses sell out too much on the pass, then Chubb just sees light fronts and they hand him the ball more, and they're going to force defense's hands. All right, the next quarterback we're going to talk about is Los Angeles Chargers, Justin Herbert. Look, Justin Herbert had a horrible year last year. And so here's the point I want to make about him. That we have Justin Herbert, who was his rookie year, he was 8th in fantasy points per game. His second year, he was 3rd. Last year, he was 14th. Now, he had injuries early in the season to his ribs. His offensive line was beat up. They lost Rashawn Slater in week 3. It was just a bad season. But the biggest problem they had were twofold. Keenan Allen, week 1, he gets an injury. He plays 44 snaps through week 10. And then, of course, Joe Lombardi was the offensive coordinator. And Joe Lombardi could not have put Justin Herbert in a worse situation. It was basically just throwing the ball to Eckler and short, like the shortest depth of target of the starting quarterbacks. It was like the worst. And here you have this massive rock and arm quarterback who could just tear up defenses downfield, and they're not using it at all. And defenses were able to compress because Herbert was not given the keys to run an offense. So finally, the coaching staff and organization, they learn their lesson. They bring in Kellen Moore, who was the Cowboys offensive coordinator. And so what we like about this is Kellen Moore will push the ball downfield more. That is going to be a very, very likely starting point for them. And so instead of an offense through the passing game that runs through a slot receiver and a running back, I expect the often injured Mike Williams to be a very big focal point of the passing game. Mike Williams plays outside. He plays in the slot. He can win anywhere. He's very big, very strong, doesn't have to be shifty to win. And we have seen when he gets targets last year in the games when they targeted him, double-digit times, he was coming up with 100-yard games consistently. He is very difficult for defenses to deal with and very difficult when you have Justin Herbert as his quarterback. So I do believe that they're starting to stretch the field. And look, Quentin Johnson, love him or hate him, he's going to be the 4th option in the offense for defenses to worry about. And realistically, running slants, very basic routes. His route running is not refined, but they could live on a diet of slants. They could use him on vertical on the perimeter sideline, and he'll have favorable coverage. And with the quarterback he has, I think that I don't know what he'll be like for his career, Quentin Johnston, but this year, he can't be in a better situation because defenses have to worry about Williams, Keenan Allen, Eckler. And so it's going to be a favorable situation. And, we don't know what we're going to get out of Keenan Allen because he missed so much time. And when a player hurts a hamstring and he misses that much time, and I know Brandon Staley might have hurried him back, but Staley's still the coach, right? But the problem is we don't know what we're getting because at that age, recovery from injury is one of the main reasons why there are very few players at the skill positions aside from quarterback in their 30s that are on NFL rosters playing at a high level, recovery from injury. And that's what we saw with Keenan Allen last year. So we have to be very nervous. But regardless, I think with the offense changing, we are going to see Justin Herbert allowed to play like a franchise quarterback, and that's exactly what he is. So drafting, if you want one of those top 6 quarterbacks and you're not waiting, for the next tier, then Justin Herbert, I think he definitely can compete just outside of that top 3. I don't know that he's going to match Patrick Mahomes or Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen, but I think that you make a very strong case that Herbert can move into that number 4 spot with Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and then Justin Fields. He can move into that because we've seen him throw 40 touchdowns in a season. We've seen it already. And his ceiling could be even higher. All right, one more quarterback before we bring in John Ryan of the Predictive Playbook to talk some gambling. But Indianapolis Colts drafted Anthony Richardson to be their quarterback of the future. Now, when we talk about Richardson, 4th pick in the draft, and clearly he is the staple of this organization right now. They have hitched themselves. They needed a quarterback. They went out. They got their guy. We've never seen a more athletically, physically dominant quarterback come into the league, right? We haven't seen him play, but we know based on what we've seen and his measurables, it's incredible the physical tools he has. Of course, as a passer, we malign this and we understand that his footwork issues, not clean. He often throws his passes at one speed, and that varying those up is important, and he hasn't gotten there yet, and he'll struggle to read safeties. But here's the thing. All right, they're going to install this offense for him, and the first thing is the offense, in my opinion, they have 5 tight ends on the roster right now, and I think all are viable. But here's the thing. I don't know if they'll keep all 5, but this tells me they're going to run at least 2 and maybe a lot of 3 tight end sets. So first of all, defenses in the NFL, they are not equipped to handle with a certain level of heavy personnel. The NFL defenses are designed to stop the pass, and they have more lighter bodies to do that. And so at some point, you gain an advantage. Ask Arthur Smith about that in Atlanta, that if you just get the bodies into that run game, you can overwhelm defenses. And so now, first of all, you have these tight ends on the roster, so you can definitely go really heavy on the personnel. Second thing is defenses are going to have to commit many bodies in. 8-man boxes may be a very normal thing. And so we talk about Richardson, maybe accuracy, but the one thing that should be there with defenses playing heavy, we may see a lot of downfield shots on play action. And the RPO is going to be through the roof for Richardson, because Richardson, I put his floor of rushing at 900 yards. And I know there's talk that Gardner Minshew may start the season. Look, if you're installing an offense all off season for Richardson with RPO and tight end heavy, Minshew can't run that offense. 1 game maximum, but you can't just change offenses in the NFL. You just can't say, oh, we're going with a different offense this week because we have a different quarterback. So it's not going to happen. He's in there. That rushing floor is going to make him a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Late in drafts, with the downfield shots I expect them to take, Alec Pierce is a great late round flyer, especially in best ball leagues, because he could have some very, very, very good spike weeks. So Anthony Richardson, if you're in a 2 quarterback league, I like him there. I like his floor. I like his running floor. And but I like his upside as well, because he doesn't have to throw for a ton of yards, and he still could get a very, very strong fantasy season. All right, today we have a special guest. And although we normally feature a fantasy football analyst in this part of the show, I wanted to hear from my go-to gambling expert who will be doing a show with me on this very channel every Saturday in the regular season. We're going to welcome in John Ryan. Now, John, he's been a professional sports bettor for over 28 years. He's hit on 70% of his 10-unit max bets over the last 3 years. And now you just want to go NFL, NCAA football, last 3 years, 62%. 52.5% break even. John is crushing it. John writes for RotoWire. You can subscribe to his betting service, the Predictive Playbook Sports Channel. We'll talk about that at the end. And make sure you're following John at John Ryan Sports 1. John Ryan, great to see you today. Say hello to everybody, and we'll get into some betting tips.
Hello to everyone. Thanks for watching the show. And Jim, thanks for that tremendous introduction. I can't thank you enough for that. It's humbling when you hear those numbers. And I guess, hard work pays off. And you know that better than anybody. I was just listening to your DFS, and you are second to nobody in the DFS industry. And when I create my lineups, and I'm not being corny here, people, I use his expertise and RotoWire's various apps and their data, and that's why I win in DFS, no doubt about it. So, Jim, how is everything going for you?
Things are going well. First day of training camp, so we're going to be going full throttle now all the way through February in the Super Bowl. John, we are very excited to have you on to talk some gambling. And look, there have been lines posted for week 1 for a while now. I want you to talk about a couple of games here. And I know everybody's hopped up about week 1 when we have the upcoming Lions against the awesome Kansas City Chiefs. The line in that game is a very fun line. It's 7.5. They put that hook on the 7. John, how do you handicap this week 1 game for people that want to get some early action on it?
Well, I'll tell you the truth, Jim. The first couple of weeks is very similar to what I do with preseason football, and I do bet preseason football. And as I always like saying, I bet numbers, not mascots. I don't take losses personally and think that the team was out to screw me out of my money and, and never bet them again type of thing. That's more for the amateurs, with all due respect. It is truly, looking at the numbers and seeing what the situation sets up to be. Now, granted, as you mentioned, the Giants may not be on my playing card for a while, especially if Barkley does not play. I think that he is by far the best player on that team. And if he doesn't play, with all due respect to the backups, I guess Braden is the next guy up for running back. I can't see a 200-pound running back trying to pick up a robber blitz on the blind side of Daniels. So, I mean, that is a big thing to consider that has nothing to do with numbers. So that is a situation where I'll probably avoid them. But in this situation, I do think Detroit is warranted to get the hype that it's getting coming into this season. They're going up against the reigning Super Bowl champ Chiefs, but there is a numerical situational angle I'm going to mention here. We're going to bet on underdogs throughout the first 4 weeks of the regular season, Jim. That favorite that they're playing against won 6 or more of their last 8 games down the stretch of the previous regular season. And overall last season, they won 75% or more of their games, which the Chiefs obviously did. These dogs are 38-47 straight up, 55%. Now, if you add the money line to that, that gives you a tremendous ROI right there. 52-32 against the number for 62% winners. And if you sprinkle the money line, and I mean sprinkle, like if you're betting $100, then a sprinkle is no more than 10. But if you sprinkle the money line on these dogs throughout the whole entire regular season, you're going to add even more profits to your bottom line. One caveat here, drilling down into the database, if that favorite at home is priced at 6.5 or more points, the Chiefs are currently 7.5. 9-21 is the dog, but look at the record since 2000. 29-1 push for 69% winners. Jim, I put 50% of my regular bet for a regular season game on the Detroit Lions already at plus 7.5. And I think that line is probably going to be closer to 6.5 as we get closer to kickoff time.
And Andy Reid has been very poor at closing out games. They get a little too relaxed. So they could have a 14-point lead in the third quarter, John, but the odds are at where you're saying that they're going to give up that backdoor cover, even if it's not backdoor, it's going to be, they may get it before that. But I think that's a very smart bet. But people see the Chiefs, they're like, okay, the Lions, maybe they had a nice little season, and they're going to kind of rationalize it. But you hit the points that you have to look at, that the professional gambler looks at, and you point out the intelligence behind making that play. So I think that's a wonderful opportunity. So after the show, make sure you're going to your favorite Sportsbook while that line is still a nice 7.5 and grab the Lions. John, I know you got another one for us. It's not the opening Thursday night game, but we go to that Sunday, and we know, hey, the Eagles, what a juggernaut they were last year, and we're excited about them this year. Patriots are playing them in week 1. The Patriots are at home. Patriots are getting 4.5 in this game. How do you handicap this game?
Well, this is kind of from my Wall Street days. This is more of an arbitrage where we're selling a potentially overvalued team in the Eagles here early on in the season and a potentially very underrated team in the Patriots. And a Patriots team, I've actually put a little bit of pizza money. Again, this is like sprinkling the money line on the Patriots at plus 750 to win the division. Why? Because everybody will say to me, John, they have no chance this year to win the division. I kind of see a lot of value at 750 to 1. If I can get that every single time with my sprinkles, I'm pretty confident I'm going to make money in the composite of all those bets over the course of the season. And I think the Super Bowl loser here, although I am very high on the Eagles, Jim, and I want to be clear on that, I think they are the team that will have the home field advantage again once we get towards the end of the season for the playoffs. But this week 1 situation is a big hangover for the Super Bowl loser, no matter who they are. So we're going to bet against the Super Bowl loser in weeks 1 through 4. Just simply doing that, 40 and 40 straight up are these Super Bowl losers.
Wow.
And against the money line, that is making a lot of money right there. 51 and 29 against the number for 64% betting against the Super Bowl loser. The under, which I do like in this game as well, 46, 33, and 1 push. And this is all since 2002. Now, if our Super Bowl loser is on the road, it gets really juicy. Although it's 18 and 23 straight up for 44%. Again, you betting the money line on these games at plus 4.5 to higher, that's going to make a tremendous return on investment over the course of a season. And the spread here, Jim, is 25 and 16 against the spread for 61% winners. And if this Super Bowl loser is a road favorite in week 1, we got to lick our chops here. 2 and 7 against the spread. So betting against them produces 78% winning bets against the Eagles here. One thing I'm going to recommend here, and I love doing live in-game betting. It's much like doing the arbitrage trading I used to do on Wall Street back in the day. I want to see the Eagles come out and score first. I'm not saying they're going to, but doesn't it make sense if you like the Patriots, maybe put 70% of your normal bet size down pre-flop, and then if the Eagles score, that line is going to get inflated even more than it should be. Why? Because they're the Super Bowl loser and they're the Philadelphia Eagles, which is everyone's favorite to win in the NFC conference again later this year. So I like that play quite a bit. And of course, as we get closer to week 1, Jim, I'll fine tune those live in-game bets for everybody on the shows.
Now, John, one more follow-up question, and I'm sure you'll have a great answer for this. The line's 4.5 right now on Eagles over Patriots. Where do you expect that line to fall a month from now, August 24th, which is still a couple weeks before that game?
Well, the opening at the Circa was 5.5, and I had said previously I thought this line, if it got going to a lower number, that we could see this at 3.5 come kickoff. I don't think it'll go below 3.5, but people are going to be scratching their head looking at 3.5, thinking, well, there's no way in God's green earth that the Eagles are going to lose week 1 against the Patriots. No way. And I think that's where the mistake will come into play. I'll get even more bullish at 3.5 than I am now at 4.5. I know that's contrarian to say, but that's kind of how us pros think. So I think that's where we're going to head here pre-flop before week 1 action takes place on Sunday.
And then John, of course, that 28 plus years of gambling experience, he lays out a beautiful case for taking the Patriots. Take them now. 4.5 that's a pivotal number, because a lot of games end 21-17, things like that. So that's a good pivotal number. It goes at 3.5, it's a different ball game. 4.5 is a beautiful line. And one thing from an NFL guy's standpoint that I'll add to your beautiful analysis is the Eagles have a turnover on defense this year, and that takes time to gel. I think the Eagles defense is going to be much better late in the season than it's going to be early. The Javon Hargrave loss will be significant. CJ Gardner-Johnson being away. They have some safety turnover. communication stuff. And Bill Belichick, I know he doesn't run the offense, Bill O'Brien will, but they will be able to attack some areas of that defense that are going to be communication issues. And so I think that's just another, just a football guy element to add to your beautiful sports gambling analysis, John. Now, John, you mentioned that you were going to put in a sprinkle in a bet on the Patriots to win the AFC East. You did put that in the middle of the analysis. Did you want to add anything, or were you good with the statements you made?
I'm good with the statements I made. I know you have to consider that's a long shot. So if you disagree with me, that's fine. But, I think Buffalo is a team that's prone for regression, and the Jets should be better. And the whole division as a whole should be much more competitive than the previous couple of seasons. And for that reason, in the NFL, sometimes these dogs win a division game by a point. They come from behind and win by 3 points. And the Patriots, still have a guy named Belichick at the helm. They have offensive coordinator that's going to call much, much better plays for the entire offense. And I think that's where the big upgrade occurs with the Patriots, and why I do like them to be a lot more competitive from the offensive side of the ball and keep themselves in the games.
So there's one other long shot. Some people are talking the AFC North may be the best division in football. We can argue back and forth, but it is a very good division. The Bengals, we know what they are. The Ravens, they really fixed some things this year by bringing in some firepower at wide receiver. And then, of course, the Browns are a team on the move. And, of course, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike Tomlin never has a losing season. John, is there any bet that you like to win the AFC North?
I do like taking the Steelers. I really do. Tom, does he even get close to the credit he deserves? I mean, he's one of the greatest coaches of all time. You could even make a case that, had he won a few more Super Bowls, he could be right up there, on the Mount Rushmore of head coaches with Belichick and the rest of them. So their defense is going to be great again. Now, Pickett, the quarterback, I think he's going to have an outstanding year. Is he going to be the MVP? Of course not. Is it possible? Remotely, but you can't rule it out that he's not going to be one of those top quarterbacks in the AFC. And Jim, you know this better than anybody. Player personnel, it always seems every year there's a couple players, a couple teams that are led by players that we just didn't see coming. And, I think this is the one situation that nobody's looking at. The Steelers are lucky to have made a winning season last year, and they're not being considered as a real contender. But if you look at that division, as you said, some of the teams are going to be better, some worse. We don't really know how good Baltimore is going to be until we actually, get into the season, maybe around week 6. But right now with the betting markets, you're getting tremendous value to bet the Steelers to win that division. And again, with pizza money, if it loses, then just don't buy one pizza that given week when it loses. That's the whole point of pizza money. It's supposed to be for fun, entertainment, and not to get rich.
Exactly. John Ryan, this has been a pleasure having you on Talking Gambling. Now, John Ryan will be in during the regular season every Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern. John will be on this show talking weekly gambling plays. But, John, I want you to take the floor right now. Tell people where they can find you, how they can get your service, and then we'll close this out.
Thanks, Jim. I really appreciate being on this show. It's a favorite show that I'm on, and can't wait for our Saturday shows to start, too, because that's always rock and roll time, too. But what I'm going to do here, just exclusive to RotoWire viewers and listeners, my regular package is kind of expensive. It's college football and NFL is $1,995 for the whole season through the Super Bowl. And humbly stated, I'm 22-5 against the number in the Super Bowls. And yes, there have been some very lucky situations down the stretch in those games that created a lot of those wins. But nevertheless, I'm going to offer right now $500 for both college football and the NFL, exclusive to you people who are nice enough to support the show and view the show and support RotoWire. And so I hope you take advantage of that, and I'll look forward to working for you for, 24 weeks coming up. I can't wait.
That's awesome. John Ryan, it's always a pleasure having you on. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Remember, you can join me tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. It'll be Tuesday on the RotoWire YouTube channel. My guest will be an outstanding fantasy analyst and friend, Jorge Martin. Everyone, have a great day, and we'll see you on Tuesday.